When we speak about death, we are not speaking about an end in the way people usually understand endings in this world. We are speaking about a transition, a movement from one stage of existence into another that is far more real, far more certain, and far more permanent than anything we experience here. Every single human being, regardless of status, wealth, power, or belief, will one day reach that moment when the soul is taken from the body. And in that instant, everything that once occupied our attention in this world suddenly loses its weight. The things we used to chase, the arguments we thought mattered, the worries that consumed our nights, all of it begins to fade in significance as a completely new reality opens before us. The grave is not simply a hole in the ground. It is the first doorway into that unseen world. It is the first stage of the journey after leaving behind this temporary life. And what is remarkable is that every soul experiences this transition alone. No companion, no relative, no friend accompanies us in that moment in the way they did in life. We are carried to the grave, but we enter it by ourselves. That in itself should make a person reflect deeply on how personal this journey truly is. We come into this world alone, and in a very profound sense, we leave it alone as well. At the moment the soul departs, there is a clarity that was not present before. It is as if a veil is lifted, and the human being begins to perceive what was previously hidden. The grave becomes the first interaction with a reality that was always there but unseen by our physical senses. The prophet of God described that what comes after death is either a garden from the gardens of peace or a pit of distress. And this begins with the experience in the grave itself. It is the beginning of a life that does not end with time as we know it, but continues in a form that is beyond our comprehension. Think about how much of our lives are spent in distraction. We chase things thinking they will define us, yet at the moment of death, none of those things accompany us. What accompanies us is something entirely different. It is our actions, our choices, the way we lived our lives when no one was watching, except the one who always watches. And in the grave, that reality begins to manifest in a way that is no longer theoretical, but experienced. There is also a profound mercy in this transition. For those who lived with sincerity, for those who tried to align their lives with truth, the grave becomes not a place of fear, but a place of peace. A place where the soul begins to experience relief from the struggles of the world. Imagine a person who has spent their life carrying burdens, and then suddenly finds themselves in a space where those burdens are lifted, where they are greeted with comfort that they could not fully imagine while alive. That is part of what this transition holds for those who prepared for it. But for all of us, regardless of where we think we stand, this moment serves as a reminder that life is not meant to be taken for granted. The grave is not distant. It is closer to us than we realize. Every passing day brings us nearer to it. Every breath is a step in that direction, whether we acknowledge it or not. And yet, instead of filling us with despair, this awareness should bring clarity. Because when a person truly understands the reality of this transition, they begin to live differently. They begin to prioritize what actually matters. So when we speak about what happens in the grave, we are really speaking about what begins when everything else ends. It is the moment where truth becomes undeniable, where illusion falls away, and where the human being steps into the first chapter of eternity. And in that moment, nothing will matter except what you brought with you. After that initial transition into the grave, there comes a moment that every human being will face, a moment that is unlike anything we experience in this world. It is the moment of questioning. And when we speak about questioning, we are not speaking about something symbolic or abstract. We are speaking about a real encounter, a moment of clarity where a person is asked about the most fundamental truths of their existence. In that space, stripped away from distractions, stripped away from status, wealth, titles, and all the identities we build for ourselves in this world, a person is asked very direct and very simple questions. Who was your Lord? What was your faith? And who was this man sent to you as a guide? These are not questions that require academic intelligence or worldly achievement. They are questions that reflect something deeper. What did you truly believe, and how did that belief shape your life? What is striking is that in this moment, nothing can be rehearsed. A person cannot rely on memory alone, nor can they depend on external validation. What speaks in that moment is not the tongue but the heart. It is the sincerity that was carried in life, the truth that was lived rather than merely spoken. If a person lived their life with awareness of their Creator, if they aligned their actions with that awareness, then in that moment clarity is granted to them. Their tongue is firm, their answers are steady, and there is a sense of peace even in the midst of something so profound. But if a person spent their life disconnected, if their beliefs were shallow or only external, if their actions contradicted what they claim to believe, then that moment becomes a reflection of that internal disconnection. It is not about perfection, because none of us are perfect. It is about direction. Where was the heart oriented? What did the person truly prioritize when no one was watching? And it is important to understand that this questioning is not meant to be a moment of humiliation, but a moment of unveiling. In this world, people can hide behind appearances. They can say things they do not truly live by. They can maintain an image that does not reflect their inner reality. But in the grave, there is no separation between appearance and truth. Everything becomes exposed as it really is. There is also a profound wisdom in this questioning. It is as if the soul is being gently but firmly anchored into its true identity. No longer can a person claim confusion or distraction. The truth becomes unmistakably clear, and in that clarity, the reality of one's life begins to unfold in its truest form. We often underestimate how important consistency is in belief. It is not the moments of intensity that define a person alone, but the steady direction of their life. Did they return to their Creator when they were alone? Did they remember Him when no one else was reminding them? Did their faith shape their character when it was difficult to do so? These are the realities that become evident in that moment of questioning. And what is remarkable is that this questioning is not just about information. It is about recognition. It is about whether the soul recognizes the truth it once knew but may have neglected. There is a difference between hearing something and truly internalizing it. And in the grave, that difference becomes fully apparent. For those who lived with sincerity, this questioning becomes a source of comfort, because it confirms what they already knew in their hearts. It is not foreign to them. It is a continuation of the truth they carried in life. But for those who were distant, it becomes a moment of awakening, a realization of what was missed when there was still time to act. And so this questioning is not something that begins in the grave alone. In reality, it begins here. Every day we live is a preparation for that moment. Every choice, every intention, every act of sincerity or neglect contributes to how that moment will feel when it finally arrives. Because in the end, when the questions are asked, there is only one thing that truly answers them: the life that was lived before them. And in that moment, truth will not need explanation. After that moment of questioning, what follows is something even more deeply tied to the reality of human existence: accountability. Because once the truth is made clear, once the soul understands its position, there comes the manifestation of what a person has truly earned through their life. And this is where the grave becomes not just a transition, not just an examination, but the beginning of experiencing the consequences of one's own choices. In this stage, a person begins to see that nothing was ever meaningless. Every act, no matter how small, carried weight. Every word spoken, every intention formed, every moment of sincerity or neglect. All of it has a reality that does not disappear with time. In this world, we often think that things fade away, that mistakes are forgotten, that time erases consequences. But in the reality that begins in the grave, nothing is lost. Everything is preserved in its fullest truth. For the one who lived with awareness, who tried to align their life with goodness and sincerity, there is a sense of expansion and comfort that begins to unfold. It is described in meaning as a space of peace, a space where the soul is given relief from the burdens of the world. Imagine a person who has been struggling in hardship, finally finding rest after a long and exhausting journey. That is the beginning of what accountability looks like for those who lived righteously. It is not merely reward in the abstract sense, but a lived experience of tranquility entering the soul. But accountability is not limited to comfort alone. It is also truth without disguise. And for those who turned away, for those who lived in neglect of the deeper purpose of life, this moment becomes a confrontation with reality that can no longer be ignored. It is not punishment in the way we often imagine in worldly terms, but rather the natural consequence of a life that was disconnected from its purpose. When a person chooses to live in contradiction to truth, the result is not imposed arbitrarily later on. It is the unveiling of what was already built within the soul. What is powerful here is the absolute justice that defines this stage. In this world, justice is often incomplete. People are misunderstood, wronged, or never given full closure. Actions are misjudged, intentions are misinterpreted, and outcomes are often unfair. But in the grave, there is no distortion, there is no bias, no corruption, no confusion. Everything is measured with perfect accuracy. Every soul is treated exactly as it deserves, without excess and without deficiency. And this should make a person reflect deeply on how merciful it is to be given life before this stage, because life itself is an opportunity to shape what comes after. Every moment of choice is actually a moment of building. Every act of kindness, every moment of repentance, every sincere turning back is not lost. It is recorded, preserved, and will eventually become part of the reality a person experiences. At the same time, every act of harm, every injustice committed against others, every arrogance that prevented humility, all of it also remains. Nothing disappears, but there is still mercy in this understanding, because awareness itself is a form of guidance. To know that accountability is real is to be given a chance to change direction before it is too late. And so, when we speak about accountability in the grave, we are speaking about a truth that should not frighten the believer but awaken them. It is a truth that brings seriousness to life, that removes illusion, and that places everything in its proper weight. It reminds us that we are not wandering aimlessly, but moving toward a moment where everything will be accounted for with absolute precision. In that reality, there is no escape from truth, but there is immense opportunity in recognizing it now, because the same scale that will measure a person in that moment is being shaped by their choices today. And when the scales are finally revealed, nothing will speak louder than what was lived. When a person reflects on everything that has been mentioned so far, the transition from this world, the questioning in the grave, and the reality of accountability, it naturally leads to a very important realization. This life cannot be lived in negligence. It cannot be treated as something random or without direction. Instead, it becomes clear that every moment carries meaning, every choice carries consequence, and every day is an opportunity that will never come again once it passes. And this is where the final reflection becomes not just a warning, but a call, a reminder, a mercy from the Creator that is meant to awaken the heart before it is too late. To prepare for eternity is not something abstract or distant. It is something deeply practical, something that begins with how a person lives right now. It begins with sincerity in intention, with correcting one's relationship with the Creator, and with becoming mindful of the fact that every breath is moving a person closer to a reality that is permanent. The danger is not in death itself, because death is inevitable for every soul. The danger is in forgetting that death exists while still having time to prepare for it. When a person truly understands that the grave is not the end, but the beginning of a long and unending journey, their entire perspective on life begins to shift. Things that once seemed enormous in importance begin to shrink in their hearts. Conflicts that once felt unbearable lose their weight. The desire to accumulate and compete for temporary gains begins to feel less urgent. Instead, a different kind of urgency emerges, the urgency to live rightly, to speak truthfully, to treat others justly, and to return to a life of sincerity. Preparing for eternity does not mean withdrawing from the world. It means engaging with it in the right way. It means fulfilling responsibilities while keeping the heart aware of where it is ultimately heading. It means that success is no longer measured only by what is gained in this world, but by what is carried forward into the next. A person may have very little in terms of material possession, but if their heart is sincere, if their actions are aligned with truth, then they are in reality preparing for something far greater than what this world can offer. And one of the most profound aspects of this preparation is the ability to return, to repent, to correct oneself while there is still time. The door is not closed as long as life remains. Every moment is an opportunity to rewrite what has been written through action. Every sincere turning back is a reminder that mercy is still present, that guidance is still accessible, and that no soul is beyond the reach of forgiveness as long as it continues to seek it. At the same time, preparation also involves how we treat others, because a person will not enter that reality carrying only their private acts of worship. They will also carry the weight of how they dealt with people, how they spoke to them, how they fulfilled or neglected their rights. In that sense, preparing for eternity is also about living with justice, kindness, humility, and awareness of the impact of one's behavior on others. A heart that is clean in its dealings with people is far closer to peace in the hereafter than a heart that only focused on itself. And perhaps one of the greatest reminders in all of this is that life itself is short, even when it feels long. Every person reaches a point where they look back and realize how quickly time has passed. Childhood becomes memory, youth becomes reflection, and even the present moment as we speak is already moving into the past. So the question is not whether time is passing, but what is being done with it while it is still here. So when we speak about preparing for eternity, we are speaking about living with awareness, living with purpose, and living with the understanding that the grave is not far away for any of us. It is closer than we think, not in a way meant to instill fear alone, but in a way that brings clarity, urgency, and meaning to every single day we are given. Because in the end, the true preparation for eternity is simply this: to live a life that you would not regret when it becomes your memory in the next world,